写真を持つ君と俺人がいた俺も好き今時それ見るばかり写真はカラー髪はブラウン目がへずる雲みたい上がるも下がるも回るも回る日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる日本人になる
Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. There are beetles buzzing above me, landing on the tree. I'm not sure what they're interested in because I don't think there's anything they eat up there in that tree. I think they're confused. And there's Ziggy. So that song was Turning Japanese in Japanese. It was an old song by the Vapors. Some of you old folks may remember that as a kind of a new wave hit back in the day. And the reason I recorded a version of Turning Japanese in Japanese was for a project that I was working on called Mitsurugi with my friend Yagi, who I talked about in another video, where we dubbed, I dubbed funny comedy serifu. What's the word serifu? Dialogue. See, sometimes there's words in my noggin that I first learned in Japanese and then had to translate into English. Well, a dialogue I probably knew, but I didn't talk about dialogue very much before I worked in a film production company. So then I got used to using the word serifu, which is Japanese for dialogue, and that's the first word I come up with. Anyway, weird things about Brad. So anyway, the reason I did Turning Japanese in Japanese was for the theme song of Mitsurugi, which I talked about on this video channel a year or two ago. I don't remember. If I can figure out how to do it, I'll put a link up here so you can see the video of Mitsurugi and see what that was. But I never actually used the vocal version of the song, so it was all for nothing. Well, not really. I had fun. So today I want to talk about misogyny in Buddhism. Well, that's kind of what I want to talk about. That's one of the things I want to talk about. Because somebody asked me if I'd ever done a video about the rampant misogyny in Buddhism, and I said I hadn't, but I mentioned to the person who asked the question that in my book, Don't Be a Jerk, there is a chapter entitled, Was Dogen the First Buddhist Feminist? And it's on page 123 of this book, if you want to go look it up. And it is all about that subject, so I thought I'd just tell you what I wrote in the book. So the title, Was Dogen the First Buddhist Feminist, is another bit of possibly clickbait stuff. Of course, it's a book and you don't click on it, but it's the same kind of idea. You can't really call Dogen a feminist because the concept of feminism didn't exist in Dogen's time. So that's the clickbait aspect of it. But I'm going to tell you why I did that little bit of clickbait. And it's because Dogen wrote an essay in the year 1240, which is a long time ago, called Raihai Tokuzui, which means prostrating to that which has attained the marrow. And attaining the marrow is a Buddhist idea that comes from the story of Bodhidharma, and it's about somebody attaining the deepest sort of enlightenment. So you prostrate to anyone who has attained the deepest sort of enlightenment, no matter who they are. And in this essay, Dogen first starts off making that point. So let me backtrack a little bit. There's an old story in Buddhism that in the earliest days of the Buddhist order, it was an all-male order, so only men could join. And this was kind of typical in Indian religions of the time. However, certain women were attracted to the practice and philosophy of Buddhism and asked to join the order, including the woman who'd raised Buddha. The Buddha's mother died in childbirth, or just after Buddha was born, but he'd been raised by this other woman, and she asked to join the order, and even the wife that the Buddha had left behind in order to go on his great spiritual quest, she also asked to join the order. At first the Buddha refused, this is the story, and then Ananda, his chief attendant, said, look, are women any less intelligent than men? And the Buddha said no, and Ananda said, are women any less capable of attaining enlightenment than men? And the Buddha said no, and then Ananda said, well, why don't you let them join the order? And the Buddha relented and let the women join the order. But there was a separate order of men and women, and that's how it worked out. And it wasn't the first Indian religion to allow women to join as monastics, but it was among the earliest. In fact, it might have been the earliest. Somebody go look that up for me. But it definitely was early on. Now, there's a book I reference in here called Women of the Way, and I gave away my copy of Women of the Way, not Women in the Way, to my friend Nina, because I thought she'd enjoy it. So I don't have it to show you, but it's by a woman named Sally Tisdale. And she doubts that the story that I just told you is historically accurate. But even if it isn't historically accurate, it reflects an attitude in the Buddhist Sangha towards this problem. And so, in that case, it's valuable. But even though that's true, there is, here's what I wrote. There is also a very strong misogynistic undercurrent in a lot of Buddhist literature that seems to be totally at odds with the story that the Buddha himself did not regard women as inferior creatures. Tisdale quotes a sutra that says, "The dead snake and the dog are detestable, but women are even more detestable than they are." Oh, so Ziggy's detestable? Well, see, I should get mad that he's saying women are detestable, but, Ziggy's my buddy. Anyway, so that's in, I didn't write down what sutra that's in, but Tisdale has a reference. Another Chinese Buddhist saying she discovered says, if there were no women, every man would be a bodhisattva. And one more says, the best thing about Buddhist heaven is that there are no women. And she quotes the Anguttara Nikaya, which is a very early Buddhist literature, that says, I see no other single form so enticing, so desirable, so intoxicating, so binding, so distracting, such a hindrance to winning the unsurpassed peace from effort, that's enlightenment, as a woman's form. Now, all this stuff is unfortunate, to say the least, that it's part of the Buddhist canon. But one thing I think is important to understand is statements like these were not directed at women to say, hey girls, you're bad. They were directed at at men trying to be celibate monks. And what you have to know about monks, especially back in those days, is Dogen, for example, joined the Buddhist order when he was 12 years old. That was not uncommon. So we're talking about adolescents in a large part. People in their teens, in their 20s, maybe in their 30s, but generally people who are at men, specifically, who are at the very height of all the hormonal stuff that's going on. I was a man that age when I was that age, so I can attest to this. It is difficult. It is difficult because everything is sex when you're that age. So they were trying, probably older monks, okay, like all religions, the Buddhist religious ideas are made up by people who are just trying to figure out how to do their best to establish the thing, the sort of purity or whatever they're trying to establish. And this was the solution they came up with, was to try to give these male monks a different way of thinking about women that would let them deal with the whole aspect of not being able to have sex. It's not a great strategy. It wasn't a great strategy then, it's a worse strategy now, and in a large part it's been abandoned, but that not completely. It still continues to this day, but it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. So given that background of how women were generally thought of, Dogen in the year 1240 wrote this essay, Dai Hai Tokuzui, bowing to that which has achieved the merit. And the first thing he says, and this is from my paraphrase of it, the most difficult thing about practicing Zazen is finding a good teacher. A good teacher, whether male or female, needs to be a strong person. And the reason he says whether male or female needs to be a strong person is the word he actually uses in Japanese is daijobu. And if you ever learn Japanese, you've probably heard the word daijobu because it means okay. Like if somebody falls off their bicycle, you go daijobu, are you okay? But it literally means a big, strong man. So in the old days when Dogen was writing, it had more of that meaning of a big, strong man. So he's saying whether a woman or a man, they have to be daijobu. The person should be someone who has that unspeakable it quality, and that's almost a literal translation, because what Dogen says is inmojin, and inmo means it, like the unnameable it that is the substance of the universe, and jin is person. So he kind of goes on like that, but I want to get to the heart of the thing where he talks about the status of women. So here's where it starts. There's a story about Indra, the most powerful of the Hindu gods, asking a wild dog to be his master, and Indra was regarded as a great bodhisattva, so the status of a teacher clearly doesn't matter. Even so, dumbheads who don't listen to the Buddha Dharma, and I said dumbheads in my paraphrase, but he really does lay into these people and say and call them stupid. So even dumbheads who don't listen to the Buddha Dharma think, I'm a senior monk, I can't learn from a junior monk, or I'm an ordained master, I can't bow to somebody who's not a master, and other such dopey things. Dunces like that are totally hopeless. Master Jushin said, I shall question anyone who is superior to me, even a 7-year-old kid. I shall teach anyone whose understanding is inferior to mine, even a 100-year-old codger. So now the scene is set up for what he's going to say next. When a female monk who has attained the truth becomes the master of a temple, male and female monks alike will join her order and bow to her, asking about the Dharma. It's like a thirsty person finding a soda machine. Of course, he says like a stream in the original. So then we have a story about Shikan, who was a student of Master Rinzai, and it says, Shikan left Rinzai and visited the female master Matsuzan Ryonen. She asked him where he had come from. Shikan said, from the front door. Matsuzan said, how come you're naked then? This was her way of saying it was better to just be polite than to try to give a goofy Zen answer. Shikan was speechless and just bowed to her. Shikan asked later to Matsuzan, what is Matsuzan? Matsuzan, whose name, like those of many Buddhist masters, was also the name of the mountain where she lived, said, Matsuzan never shows her peak. Shikan said, no, I mean, who is the person who lives in the mountain? Matsuzan said, it is beyond male and female. Shikan said, so why don't you change? Matsuzan said, I'm not the ghost of a wild fox. Why change? The ghost of a wild fox means somebody who's deceptive. And then we get a series of stories about important female Buddhist teachers. The nun Myoshin was the disciple of Ziggy likes Myoshin, was the disciple of Kyozan Ejaku. When the chief of the temple's business affairs retired, Kyozan asked his assembly who they thought was most qualified. Everyone agreed that even though Myoshin was a woman, she had the balls to do the job. And that, again, is in the original, is a use of the word daijobu, which means big, stout fellow. And so it's kind of similar in feeling to she had the balls to do the job. Dogen says, over in China, if a female monk becomes a master, everybody respects her. The male monks listen to her. That's an established tradition. Any male monk, regardless of his attainment, will bow and listen to a female monk who understands the Dharma. Why should men be higher? Emptiness is emptiness. The elements are the elements. Men and women are both able to attain the highest truth. Everyone who attains the truth deserves to be revered. Don't worry about whether they're male or female. And then he mentions that in China there were female emperors who were just as respected as male emperors, and even in Japan this happened. Even if you shave your head and look like a monk but don't know this, you're not worthy of being called a monk. People here in Japan follow such lousy customs as denigrating female monks without even realizing what a bunch of doofuses they are. These days, really stupid people think of women only as objects of sexual greed. Disciples of the Buddha must not be like this. If anything that someone could possibly lust over should be hated, then all men should be hated too. Even in ancient China, there was an asinine monk who said, in every life, in every age, I shall never look at a woman. What kind of morality is that crap based on? Is that Buddhism? Why would you say all women are bad? Why would you say all men are good? There are bad men and good women. Before they cut through their delusions, both men and women are equally delusional. If a man vows never to look at a woman, must he disregard women when it comes to his oath to save all beings? This vow is like something a wino might mumble on a 3-day bender. I changed that a little, but he does basically say it's like something a stupid drunk would say. Don't be like that guy. And then he says, here in Japan we have a particularly laughable institution called places of seclusion, or Mahayana practice places. Female monks and female lay people are not allowed into these places. This wrong custom has been with us so long that people don't even know how ludicrous it is. You could split a gut laughing at how absurd this is. And he actually does say split a gut. And then he says, moreover, if something shouldn't be changed just because it's an ancient tradition, shouldn't we give up the whole Buddhist training thing just because the ancient tradition in our own country is just to bumble through life aimlessly? He's kind of laying in there. Shakyamuni Buddha established our tradition, and he admitted both men and women into his order. So what kind of so-called Buddhist order has no women in it? There have been women who were as fully enlightened as anyone else, so what kind of place could exist that enlightened women should be banned from just because they're women? Those who exclude women from places of practice are a bunch of idiots. Yet in such places as these, any man, even if he's a total douchebag, can just randomly show up and hang out. What sense is there in that? Those who establish and maintain male-only sanctuaries don't understand that the whole universe is sanctified. They think their little sanctuary is so special. Let's hope they get over their stupor soon so they don't violate the whole world. Who could deny that the very act of bowing to that which has attained the marrow is the truth itself? And if you want to find the original version, there's a translation in Volume 1 of the Nishijima Cross, Shobogenzo. It's called Daihai Tokuzui. I'll let you find that, bowing to what has attained the marrow. There are other translations out there. But this was something early in my study of Buddhism that I encountered pretty early on. Tim, my first teacher, had lectured about it a little bit, and it really impressed me because before I got into Zen, I had been hovering around the edges of the Hare Krishna movement, and one of the things that really turned me off about the Hare Krishna movement was how blatantly misogynistic they are. I mean, they will actually tell you that men are superior to women, men are more intelligent than women. It's just ridiculous. And so seeing this, I thought, okay, this is something I can get behind. This is something that speaks to me, that makes a lot of sense. Which isn't to say that there's not misogyny. I hate double negatives. Which is to say that there still is misogyny in Buddhism. There's still plenty of misogyny in Buddhism. I remember once I was at Tassajara. I can't remember if this was something... No, this wasn't something I witnessed. Somebody else had seen it like a week before I got there, where this monk from some order had showed up, and some woman had tried to shake his hand, and he was like, no, I must not shake your hand. So this does still exist, but as I say, it's kind of dying out. But then again, we're having kind of the problems that people were worried about, which is when you have a male and female mixed monastery, you have problems. And anybody who's looked at the sexual scandals that's happened in some of the Buddhist world will know some of these problems. So we're trying to get it right. And eventually I assume we'll get it right. But right now we haven't quite got the balance worked out, but we've only really just started that. Male and female mixed Buddhist monasteries are basically a phenomenon that first occurred in the 20th century, so it's not even a century old. So, we'll see how it goes in the next few centuries and see if we work it all out and stop having sex scandals. But there you go, that's my little talk about misogyny in Buddhism. This has already gone on much longer than I wanted it to, so I'm going to quit there. If you're in Europe, you can come and see me at the dates you're seeing on the screen. I will be in Finland, Germany, Belgium, France, and England. And if you want to know more about these dates, you can go to hardcorezen.info/events, and there you can find clickable links. You can also find links in the description below this YouTube video, so go there and find out more. And if you want to support me doing these things, because I will get paid for most of the events I'm doing in Europe, but it's not going to be enough to make a living on, so I still depend on your support, you can go to the URL you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are really my main way of making a living, and I appreciate your support, but as always, this is offered for free, so you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you later. Have a good time all the time. Don't stop bowing to that which has attained the marrow. How you doing? You want to go back inside? Yeah, it's too hot out for you here, huh? All right, we'll go back inside and edit the video, okay? See you later, Ziggy.